When I walk into a community and I see American flags all over the community and I suddenly feel unsafe.
Somehow, The View's 4th of July episode is even worse than you expect. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, your home for independent political commentary on news, media, the internet, culture, and more. Buckle up, because we're going to check in on the lovely ladies of The View over on ABC under their news division and their inspirational coverage of July 4th, where they talked about, the different things they love about America, and they brought this unifying, beautiful message and had a really deep and soulful and intellectual conversation. Gotcha, bitch. This is actually one of the worst episodes of The View that has ever aired, and that is saying something. And y'all know, for me, The View, they're my favorite lolcows. But they talked about America 250, they talked about the 4th of July, and went on some of the most unhinged and race-baiting, wannabe victim contest nonsense that I have ever seen on the show, and that is saying something. So first, you have to see this clip. Fill-in guest co-host, Michelle Buteau, she showed a photo of herself from the 4th of July, presumably, where she'd had a cake made that said, "America, do better." And she really thought that she did her big one or something. Let's watch.
And and Mandani is so eloquent. I wish I could just gather my thoughts like that. I just, put my feelings on a cake. I think we have that picture. Can we show that picture? Yeah, that's what I do. Message it, and it's a message, and I get to eat. That's where I'm at.
250 years.
Yes.
We can do better.
Let's do better.
I don't know how she thought this was cute or funny or anything other than cringe and kind of embarrassing. I mean, you just come off as really grumpy and out of touch when you choose to get a cake made for an Instagram photo bashing America on the 4th of July. Wow, you're so edgy. Of course, with no actual insight or anything to offer. And this gets my most MAGA instincts flowing, this kind of thing, because it's maybe you should start doing better, and it might involve eating a little bit less cake, hon. Because I can hear your arteries screaming from here, and your solution is to make yourself a cake to shove down your gullet to try to do your big one on July 4th by crapping on America. It's just so dumb. It's so toxic. It's not constructive in any way. Obviously, America can do better in a number of ways and is a flawed country, but we're also an amazing country. And this is somebody who's arisen to some sort of media celebrity status and is incredibly financially comfortable and is free to say and do whatever stupid crap she wants to do. You could just have a tad smidgen of appreciation for it. And then there's just something about going out and getting a cake made to crap on America on July 4th, which is so extra and so obnoxious that it's just, I find it to be. And then thinking I don't know who these delusional bitches in the crowd are that are clapping, but obviously, they have brain damage or they're the victims of some sort of surprise lobotomy or something because they pay to be in attendance in the live audience of The View. So anyway, a few of them are clapping, but the idea that you would think any normal person's going to watch that and not look at you like you're weird. It's you don't even know how to enjoy a holiday with your family. You had to try to make a political virtue signaling, anti-patriotism effort that ironically just made you look also like a fat ass. And that's no shade to anybody who's overweight or struggles with overeating or obesity. I know it's hard. I know it's not easy or anything, but y'all aren't out here making yourself a whole cake just to make an obnoxious political point. And then not seeing how about how America needs to improve, and you're not even working on yourself to get that blood pressure down. That's crazy. So it's not a shade to anybody struggling with their weight or anybody who likes to have a treat. Trust me, I got a sweet tooth. But don't be making moves like this and then expect us not to go for the low-hanging fruit. I'm sorry. It's there. Not that you would know, because you're not reaching for any fruit. All right? Anyway, this was just the beginning. You'd think this one moment would be the most you would get. But then it got into a little bit of a more serious conversation about race in America. And I'll preface this by saying that, like, I understand there are unique challenges and struggles that face Black people, and there's still racism, and I think that's abhorrent, and I think we need to close opportunity gaps and all sorts of things. But I just don't believe the kind of hyperbolic victim narrative that folks like Sunny Hostin, one of the hosts on The View, will spin, where she acted like this extremely unusual circumstance that was photographed, that went viral, of a Black woman on the DC Metro surrounded by Patriot Front attendees who were going to participate in a rally over the weekend in DC, who are like white nationalists, fringe types, and cover their faces. And it was an extremely ominous photo. This random Black woman is like going, I don't know, home or to work or whatever, and she's just surrounded by all these masked men. She actually, Sunny Hostin, rather than that being like a kind of chilling but extremely unusual circumstance that was caught on camera, Sunny actually was suggesting that that's like typical American life for a Black person, and it's really not. Anyway, let's listen to what she had to say.
But in terms of as a Black woman, my lived experience in this country was embodied by a photograph that was taken in celebrating the 250th.
Yeah. There was a 4th of July march in D.C. by masked white nationalists who were also caught on camera riding the metro with a very concerned-looking woman. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum.
So before we get into what Doug Burgum said about it, I will say I find these men to be despicable, both for their, fringe and toxic views, but also for the cowardice. Like, why don't you show your face, right? Why don't you say it with your chest? If you're really such a proud American nationalist who's just standing up for white people against whatever, say it with your chest and show your face. Right? I don't have a lot of respect for people who hide behind anonymous Twitter accounts or masks in public or anything. But, they're not, as far as I know, violating the law. They are allowed to, as much as I think they're a extremist and reprehensible group, they're allowed to peacefully assemble and do whatever stupid, insane advocacy they want to do. That is just a product of a First Amendment free speech protective society. And I am not for a second going to pretend that this unique circumstance is somehow like a regular occurrence, or like these people represent even a mainstream sentiment. I mean, it's a fringe group. It's not a mainstream perspective. And then Sunny Hostin keeps repeating the buzzword lived experience. That's actually a red flag, by the way, that phrase. Anytime somebody, first off, the only kind of experience is lived. That it's like, it's a redundant phrase, really, but also it's like a woke buzzword that tells you that they're about to make sweeping assertions that are rooted only in anecdotal experience that's not actually, rigorous or analytically being applied. So actually, lived experience is not super relevant to most conversations, but they like to make it because then you can't really refute someone's lived. I mean, I do and I would, but they feel like it shields them from being refuted because they can just say, that's my lived experience. That's my truth. You can't question it. But I do question it. I do question the idea, Sunny Hostin, that your life is summed up by this photo as if you are just constantly surrounded by white supremacists and made to feel unsafe or uncomfortable because of it. I don't believe that. And I don't think that, while I do think racism exists and is evil and is a problem, I don't think that represents an average Black person's experience either. And there's also some data on that we'll look at in a second. But let's roll the rest of this clip.
See that picture? Look at that.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Doug Burgum was asked if he condemns the group's message on CNN. He's a Trumper. Watch.
I think that certainly is what they stand for is nothing that I could possibly agree with, but one of the foundational principles of the United States which makes democracy messy is free speech. And there are plenty of things that I see that I might personally find offensive, irreprehensible. But in America, free speech is allowed.
Hang on. So listen, I'm pretty critical of the Trump administration, and I don't know, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other about Doug Burgum, but I'm not able to detect what he said that was wrong. Like, he said that he doesn't agree with their views, he finds them reprehensible, but they're not hurting anyone physically, they're not committing crimes, they're taking the public metro to go do a public protest and demonstration, which they are legally and constitutionally entitled to do, as they should be, right? Because we don't want the government deciding that some groups are too controversial or some ideas are too naughty or offensive to be allowed. And it's the same, frankly, it's the same right that protects their right to go and speak, even though lots of people hate their views, that protects the rights of, like, radical trans activists to go and demonstrate, or anti-war protesters, or free Palestine people, or a pro-abortion activists, or any number of causes that I'm sure the lovely ladies of The View all rally behind and support. It's like you really do have to either have a system of protective free speech and legal protections that are viewpoint neutral, and that does mean that crazy and evil people will get to say their piece, or you don't. It kind of is an all or nothing thing. And I personally see nothing wrong with, obviously it doesn't make it good, but I think it's important and American to have that, and then challenge those ideas, call them out, and distance yourself from them and disagree with them. So I don't hear anything that Doug Burgum says here, who's a Trump cabinet official, that's, like, wrong or controversial. He was pretty clear. He disavows this group's beliefs, but obviously they're Americans and they have the right to organize and speak and protest. But they're acting like this is some crazy clip from him. It's really not, at least to me. Anyway.
So for that, they're concerned about the First Amendment.
Correct.
But getting Jimmy Kimmel off the air, that doesn't count.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Correct.
Well, okay. That's just, like, very different. One of them is a federally regulated and licensed broadcaster that uses public airwaves. And even I don't agree with the Trump administration on that, but doesn't change the fact that unambiguously the Patriot Front people have a First Amendment right to organize and meet in DC and have a public protest. The Trump administration could not legally stop them if they wanted to. That's just, and even if they're inconsistent on some other free speech related things, so that doesn't mean that therefore they should blatantly, unambiguously violate the First Amendment now. It's like, I don't know, not a serious critique. Anyway, now Sunny's going to get into the point of really race baiting and just kind of pushing this idea that Black people are just constantly subjected to being surrounded by extremist white supremacists all the time or something, and which I don't believe. But anyway, here's her making that case.
Correct. And that's the thing. When I think, unfortunately, in this country, people have different lived experiences. So while some may have a lived experience like this is the best country in the world, and while there's some stuff that goes on, other things are okay, that for me was a defining image of modern America for Black Americans.
Yes.
Defining.
I'm sorry. It's really not a defining image of modern America, where all across this country, people of all different races interact peacefully and marry each other and are friends and are neighbors and play sports together and all this stuff. You found this one extreme example that I agree is a disturbing image, and I do feel bad for the young woman in that image. I'm sure she was very uncomfortable, and those men are crazy and scary, but the idea that that's, like, somehow nationally representative, I just totally think is wrong. I think it's just stirring up a racial tension. I think it's race baiting. And also there's some data about, like, when you ask Black Americans for themselves, like, what do you believe about the state of race and racism in America, and how much does it affect your life? They certainly don't describe that level of racial oppression or racism surrounding them constantly in everyday life. Now, they do say that most of them have experienced racism, and the racism is a problem, that they feel held back or mistreated in different ways, but they don't say that represents our life, constantly being surrounded by secret white supremacists who hate us. So here's some data actually from Pew Research. They asked about Black Americans whether they have personally experienced discrimination or been treated unfairly because of their race or ethnicity, and 23% said no, that they have never been personally experienced discrimination or been treated unfairly because of their race or ethnicity. And then 62% said yes from time to time, which is sporadic, right? It's not super regular. It shouldn't, to be honest, it should never happen. I'm not saying it's okay or good or fine just because it's occasional. I'm not saying that at all. But they're saying, from time to time in my life, I have experienced that. That is not the same as, or even anywhere close to suggesting that, I'm just constantly surrounded by white supremacists and racism, as Sunny Hostin is saying, is now like typifying the modern Black experience. And so what you have there is like cumulatively over 80% vowing, very explicitly disavowing the sentiment, or saying something very different than what Sunny Hostin would suggest and would have you believe about how often they experience race and racism in America. About 13% of Black adults said they regularly experience racial discrimination. And then I guess you'd need to get into the specifics about what does that mean or what does that look like to know if it's really comparable to what Sunny was saying. But even if we just grant her that, that's still like the vast, vast majority are not describing anything like what she's describing. So then what you have is somebody who is just repeating the buzzword of lived experience. Also, by the way, super privileged, elite educated multimillionaire living in New York City, but whatever. My lived experience is just a buzzword. Your lived experience doesn't mean anything. And it might be relevant in some contexts, but you can't extrapolate it to draw conclusions about an entire population. And then you are pushing a level of victimhood and grievance that is not really borne out by most people's experience when you look at actual data. So I don't know what to call that other than divisive and irresponsible. Then again, I mean, this lady, Sunny Hostin, is literally out here saying that the American flag makes her feel unsafe. I'm not kidding. Listen to this. It's actually beyond parody.
And I said this on this show many, many years ago, because this is my 10th year on the show, and I said there are times when I walk into a community and I see American flags all over the community, and I suddenly feel unsafe because there is a section of this country that has co-opted the American flag, and they equate being an American or an American flag with white supremacy, and that should never be the symbol of white supremacy, but they have weaponized.
Because the flag belongs to all of us.
It does belong to all of us. But those men were wearing a flag.
So, to try to be a little fair to Sunny, it's true that some racists and extremists use the American flag as a symbol. But 99% of the time, it's not that. And if she's in a community where she's seeing a lot of American flags, most of those people are just indicating patriotism and that they love America and are not indicating any sort of racist sentiment. And the vast, vast, vast majority of racial minorities in America would totally disagree with the sentiment she just described. In fact, there's a good chance that if you're going around town and you see a bunch of American flags, the house that belongs to might be a minority. A lot of them wave flags or deck out in red, white, and blue for the 4th of July. That is not a racist symbol. And the idea that you would need to feel unsafe is also absurd, because there's no threat to you whatsoever, and you're just telling on yourself that you're an extremely paranoid and mentally and emotionally fragile person, which is concerning for your own sake. But I'll just give you an example. I went to Miami Beach for 4th of July and South Beach, and we're out there and we're surrounded by tons of Black people, tons of Hispanic people of different ethnicities and persuasions, tons of them decked out in red, white, and blue. A lot more than me as a white person. I was just wearing normal clothes, I think. And you drive around Miami, you'll see American flags as well, and odds are it's a Hispanic person, not even a white person or a Caucasian person at least. So I just don't believe this for a second. I really do think this just reeks of elitism, total existing in a bubble, out of touch. I forget what it was, but Joy Reid said something similar. She's a former MSNBC leftist journalist who's a Black woman. She said, all the Black people I know, most of us are not celebrating 4th of July or something. It's like, all right, then you talk to other elite, wealthy, hyper leftists, not, representative of the typical Black people, because average Black people all across the country by the millions turn up and celebrate July 4th. Like, you are abnormal and in an echo chamber and a bubble. And it's fine. You have a right to live in like a little bit of a bubble of people that agree with you or whatever, but don't then extrapolate it as if it's a widespread sentiment, or as if just because you check off some box on the census and repeat buzzwords like lived experience over and over again, you have some kind of insight or knowledge into what this community is experiencing or truly believes. You don't. And it's obvious. And I'm sorry, but anybody who's feeling unsafe when they see an American flag is deranged and conspiratorial, combined with like weirdly fragile, to a point where I can't take anything they say about the state of America and our politics and news seriously. But that's not exactly like new and different for The View. Yet millions of people tune in to this show, unironically. That I truly cannot understand. But anyway, that's just my take. Y'all will have to let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Do hit the like button. Do consider becoming a channel member to support my content, where I'm independent. I call it the far left and far right and just try to make some sense of this crazy world we're living in. Unlike the ladies of The View, I do not have multi-million-dollar contracts from cable news companies or massive media conglomerates, so I do need support from viewers like you. Hit the join button or the link in the description to become a channel member now. I also do videos reacting to comments and questions from members. So if you have something you want to get my thoughts on, just become a channel member and drop it in the comments. And regardless, guys, that'll be it for this video. We'll be back with more real soon.